The legend of Rolex, the boy who became one of the world's most successful men. You must have placed your eye on the sponsors when you watch any high-end sports event. Have you seen the golden green logo with a crown? There's hardly any person we know who wouldn't recognize that. That very logo is that of Rolex. Rolex is a luxury watch brand very popular among each generation. Today, we learn about Rolex and Hans Wilsdorf, the poor young boy who made it big to something like Rolex. Without further ado, let's get started. So, who was Hans Wilsdorf? Born on March 22, 1881 at Kalmbach of the German Empire, Wilsdorf was a Bavarian British citizen. He was born to parents Anna and Johann Daniel Ferdinand Wilsdorf. Orphaned at an early age, his mother died when he was a young boy, followed by his father's death at the tender age of 12. Wilsdorf's fate was up to his uncle's deeds, and they surely were for his best. His uncle sold their traditional iron tools business, which had belonged to Wilsdorf's grandfather and then to his father. As a result, Wilsdorf and his sister received the best education. They were sent off to the best boarding schools where they had access to an excellent education. He quotes in his autobiography, "Our uncles were not indifferent to our fates. Nevertheless, the way in which they made me become self-reliant very early in life made me acquire the habit of looking after my possessions, and looking back, I believe that it's to that much of my success is due." Wilsdorf was a bright kid. He had a keen interest in mathematics and languages. These interests did inspire him to travel around and work in various foreign countries. With an influential international pearl exporting company, Hans had begun his career as an apprentice. The experience Hans had gained through his pearl exporting company as its apprentice played an important role in how he dealt with the future. Wilsdorf began his career in the year 1900. He began working for a Swiss watchmaking company and later moved to La Chaux de France, where he worked as an English correspondent and a clerk. During those days, a person named Kuno Cortin had been exporting pocket watches worth around 1 million francs annually. Kuno Cortin had his hand at all levels of watches and also had manufactured a few watches. Wilsdorf, in his job, had the responsibility for daily winding hundreds of pocket watches and also verifying that all the watches worked accurately. Wilsdorf gained enormous virtue in watchmaking during the tenure with Kuno Cortin, where he received important outlooks on how all types of watches were produced and manufactured. The beginning of Rolex. In 1905 in London, England, Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis founded the firm Wilsdorf and Davis, which would eventually be a revolution, Rolex. During those years, the main commercial activity of Wilsdorf and Davis concerned Hermann Egler's Swiss movements import to England and placing the same in certain watch cases made by Denison and others. Such wristwatches were later sold to many jewelers, who would then put their brand line or names on the watch's dial. The initial watches which Wilsdorf and Davis manufactured used to be hallmarked W&D inside the caseback. Wilsdorf registered the trademark Rolex in 1908, later becoming the brand line of the Wilsdorf and Davis watches. Switzerland had one of Rolex's first offices at its La Chaux de France. The few reasons for Wilsdorf to have gone with the brand name Rolex was that he wanted a brand name that could be easily pronounced in any language required and also fit on the face of a watch, so it had to be short enough. In November of 1915, the company changed its name from Rolex to Rolex Watch Company Ltd. The company had moved from England to Geneva, Switzerland in 1919 under the supervision of Hans Wilsdorf because the war then had consequences. There were very expensive export duties allowed on silver and gold to be used for the watch cases. Heavy post-war taxes were applied on such luxury imports. The company's name was again changed twice following this. In 1920, the company's name was officially registered as Monstres Rolex SA and later was transformed to Rolex SA. Wilsdorf had visions, and they were quite clear. He put everyone in the company and their attention to the moisture issue under the dial, crown, and dust infiltration, which damaged the movement and was a marketing challenge. To address this problem, in 1926, things took a turn for good. A Mediator case maker had produced a dust-proof and waterproof revolutionary wristwatch for Rolex and named it Oyster. This allowed the watch to be adjusted while maintaining protection for water ingress. These qualitative features were only purchased but never invented by Rolex and had quick and heavy sales in the market. The fun feature of the watch was that it had optimal protection for movement, as it was in a hermetically sealed case. As a demonstration, Rolex tested out its watch to a great extent, which must clearly explain its market value. The Oyster models were kept submerged in aquariums that would be displayed during the main points of sale. In 1927, the first Rolex ambassador dates back to 1927. She was the British swimmer Mercedes Glatze and swam the English Channel sporting an oyster on her necklace. Rolex made it big. It needed celebration. So the Daily Mail had a full-page advertisement for every issue. For a whole month, every release's front page published by Rolex that celebrated the 10-hour swim and, of course, its own watch's feat. The Oyster watch later went on to be known as the Oyster Perpetual because of the addition of the perpetual rotor that relied on gravity for free movement. Rolex later patented this. Rolex after Wilsdorf. Wilsdorf's wife expired in the year 1944, following which Wilsdorf established a private trust, the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, at which he left all of the Rolex shares he owned. Wilsdorf wanted to make sure that at least some of the company's income, the least he could offer, would go to charity. In 1960, Wilsdorf passed away. After Wilsdorf's death, the Rolex SA had been owned and run ever since. The Rolex SA is now privately owned by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. The Hans Wilsdorf Foundation is stated to pay lower tax rates as its registered Swiss charitable organization. Like charities run by high-end brands, this one also has controversies. In 2011, several scandals were brought up because a spokesman for Rolex turned down providing evidence concerning the number of charitable donations ever made by the Wilsdorf Foundation. This stirred the fact that there was a lack of transparency. The company has given 2 housing buildings and many other different things to people in Geneva, where the company is actually based. The 2017 brand value was estimated at $8.053 billion, a $7.9 billion in 2022. Rolex watches have always been a status symbol and continue to be. The annual turnout of the company is more than just 1 million timepieces per annum. It's said that the power of the crown is never more felt than when trying to negotiate space in a retail environment for the product of another brand. Manufacturing interests of Rolex. Mechanical watches are a favorite of Rolex and are the only genre it manufactures. Still, it's taken an interest in original quartz watch movements and also participated in its development. But for evidence, Rolex has very few quartz models for the Oyster line of the brand line. Its history proves how Rolex had its own traditional manufacturing bases. Rolex had a collective collaboration with 16 Swiss watch manufacturers in 1968. In 2005, material-wise, the Cerachrome ceramic bezel was first used by Rolex as its first on the GMT Master 2 range, and ever since then, Rolex has taken the usage of a ceramic bezel. The ceramic bezel variety is witnessed across the brand's professional sports watches. The ceramic bezel is also available across all the ranges Submariner, Sea Dweller, Deep Sea, GMT Master 2, and Daytona models. In addition, the ceramic bezel color tends to not wear out due to the watch's exposure to UV light. Another win was that the ceramic bezel was very scratch resistant. Compared to the aluminum bezel, the ceramic bezel has many advantages and pros. Rolex uses 904L grade stainless steel, whereas 316L grade steel is what most Swiss watches are manufactured with. Rolex uses the higher grade as it's a higher end brand. It has to ensure that all of its features are perfectly fine. However, the reason behind using the high grade steel was the same. It always left a beautiful luster. Do you own a Rolex or at least anticipate owning one someday? Which Rolex range is your personal favorite? Let us know in the comment section below.